I married the daughter of the Xiang family on the same day, but the wedding procession got mixed up. The Wang family sent someone to correct it, only to find it was already too late. Afterwards, Xue Mingzhuo knelt before me, pleading. It was my mistake to fall for Song Wan, so I came up with this plan. Please, don't hold it against her, princess. What Xue Mingzhuo didn't know was that Song Wan, the medical woman he desperately wanted to save, had no medical skills at all. The veil was lifted, and my eyes were dazzled by the bright candlelight, making it a moment before I could focus on Zhao Shuyuan, dressed in bright red wedding attire. When he saw it was me, his expression showed some surprise. He then respectfully bowed and said, "Princess Ningen." I waved my hand, signaling him to skip the formalities, and frowned slightly. "How come it's you? Where's Xue Mingzhuo?" Today, the princess and the daughter of the Xiang family are both getting married, and with the Xue and Zhao families being neighbors, it seems the wedding sedan was switched by mistake. Please don't worry, I've already sent someone to inform the Xue family. They should be able to correct it promptly. We waited for a long time, but no one showed up. Zhao Shuyuan sat at a small table by the window, turning a blue and white porcelain teacup between his fingers. He had already drunk more than half of a pot of tea. The red candles burned lower, the wax dripping and solidifying into thin red layers, each ring shimmering with an oily sheen. Zhao Shuyuan finally couldn't hold back any longer. He stood up, his brows furrowed in irritation. What on earth is Xue's family up to? They haven't given any reply for so long. General Zhao, calm down. You've been away at war for years and don't know much about the capital. What's your impression of Xue Mingzhuo? I haven't had any direct dealings with him, Zhao Shuyuan said, glancing at me and speaking calmly. But people in the capital speak highly of him. I smiled slightly, though there was no warmth in my eyes. Yes, he's young and already holds a third-rank official position, deeply favored by the emperor. Everyone praises Xue Mingzhuo for his outstanding talent and abilities. General Zhao, there's no need to be anxious. Just wait a bit longer. Surely there will be some news soon. As I said that, within a tea's worth of time, Xue's family sent back a message. When Zhao Shuyuan learned that Xue Mingzhuo had even gone so far as to consummate the marriage, his face darkened immediately. I said softly, "My marriage to Xue Mingzhuo was arranged long ago. General Zhao and Song Wan were a match made by the emperor. Xue Mingzhuo requested that Song Wan and I marry on the same day." Though the Zhao and Xue families are neighbors, such a coincidence of switching the wedding sedan seems unlikely. Even if it was a coincidence, Xue's family delaying their response until the situation was irreversible, isn't that a coincidence too? Zhao Shuyuan's eyes were filled with anger, so Xue Mingzhuo is scheming against me. Princess, I'll arrange for someone to take you back later. I'm going to settle the score with Xue Mingzhuo. I stopped Zhao Shuyuan. The wedding ceremony has already been performed. How would you have me manage if you send me back now? General Zhao and Song Wan's marriage was arranged by the emperor. Xue Mingzhuo's actions defy the emperor's will, and he will face punishment. If you're upset, you might as well make him uncomfortable tonight. Zhao Shuyuan nodded and went out. When he returned, he told me he had stormed into the Xue residence and had all the valuable flowers and trees in Xue Mingzhuo's garden dug up, even moving 2 artificial hills. He had been away for years, so his home was quite empty and lacked the elegance of the Xue residence. After this incident, his residence had gained quite a few new items, giving it a bit of a semblance of style. Princess, you should rest early if you're tired. I'll sleep outside. After saying this, Zhao Shuyuan picked up a rolled-up mat and left. Before he returned, I had already changed out of my wedding attire into my night clothes, lying under the covers on the bed waiting for him. But Zhao Shuyuan went out directly, leaving me uncertain of what to do. After hesitating for a while, I got out of bed and quietly went outside. Seeing me come out, Zhao Shuyuan got up from the soft couch, lowered his head, and asked, "Princess, is something the matter?" When I took his hand, I felt a momentary stiffness in his movements. I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in my voice, and looked straight into Zhao Shuyuan's eyes. "We've already performed the wedding ceremony. If you avoid me like this, Does that mean our marriage is not real? The air seemed to freeze, moving slowly and thickly. Zhao Shuyuan's lips curled into a faint smile, his voice somewhat hushed. Of course it's real. You're right, princess. I made a mistake earlier. Moonlight filtered through the window, creeping along the bed curtains, casting flickering shadows of red silk. The next day, Xue Mingzhuo was punished in front of the emperor, kneeling for an entire day and night. The emperor removed him from his official position and sent him home to rest. Zhao Shuyuan was summoned to the palace, and as soon as Xue Mingzhuo left, he came to the Zhao residence to see me. I thought about it for a moment and decided to meet with him. Xue Mingzhuo was taken aback when he first saw me, muttering, "It's you." I gave him a slight nod and said, "Mr. Xue, it's been a while." Xue Mingzhuo and I had met once before. When he was handling a case in Yongzhou, outlaws had kidnapped me and a young child, threatening him to choose one to save. The bandits, their faces twisted in cruelty, had asked him which one he would choose. Xue Mingzhuo chose neither. He risked falling off a cliff to save both of us. But he was wounded with a knife in his chest, bleeding profusely, and nearly didn't survive. Later, when I learned that this person was to be my husband, I was secretly relieved. He didn't abandon either me or the child. Instead, he risked his own life to save us both. My future husband was a man of the highest character. So, when I guessed that Xue Mingzhuo had orchestrated the switch, I was quite surprised. He must have been deeply in love with Miss Song. 4. The first thing Xue Mingzhuo did was to apologize to me. The second thing was to beg me not to make things difficult for Miss Song. Though Wang comes from the Xiang family, she is only a secondary daughter and has no maternal family to rely on. I resorted to this plan because I admired her. I don't ask for your forgiveness, only that you don't trouble her. I looked at him steadily and promised, I'll agree to that. But I want to know, Mr. Xue, why did you dare to offend the emperor and set up such a scheme, risking your official position? When he mentioned Song Wan, Xue Mingzhuo's stern expression softened slightly, and he unconsciously smiled. 3 years ago, while investigating a case in Yanshui town, I fell into a trap set by villains and ended up blind and falling into a river. A woman saved me and took care of me on a boat for a month. When I recovered, I had urgent matters to attend to and had to leave in a hurry. I could only leave behind my personal jade pendant as a token. But when I returned to Yanshui town, I couldn't find her anywhere. Recently, I met Wang at Huqiao and recognized the jade pendant she wore. After talking to her, I confirmed she was the woman who saved my life. At this point, Xue Mingzhuo's face showed a hint of regret and helplessness. But at that time, I was already betrothed to the princess. I intended to find a day to cancel the engagement with the Wang family, but then the emperor arranged a marriage between Wang and General Zhao. Forced into a corner, I came up with this plan. Hearing this story, the lingering resentment I felt began to dissipate. But one thing left me puzzled. Mr. Xue, are you certain you met that young woman in Yanshui town? Did she tell you her name? Xue Mingzhuo answered firmly. It was definitely Yanshui town.
There's no mistake.
Wang didn't give me her real name, only asking me to call her a Xian. At this, I felt a slight tremor in my fingers holding the teacup. I lifted my eyelids and stared at Xue Mingzhuo for a long time. In the end, I didn't tell him that I had also spent some time in Yanshui town 3 years ago. During those 3 months, I used the name A Xian. Before leaving, Xue Mingzhuo stared at the newly placed artificial hills in the courtyard for a moment, his expression hard to describe. Seeing this, I just gave him a distant smile.
5.
While looking at fabrics in the Luo clothing store, I ran into Song Wan. I was listening to the shopkeeper introduce a new batch of goods when suddenly a commotion broke out outside. Who do you think you are? Just a wild bastard who appeared out of nowhere. Do you really think that by climbing onto the high branches of the Prime Minister's family and the Xue family, you can turn into a phoenix? You've caused Xue Mingzhuo to lose his official position, and the Xue family wishes you dead. And Princess Ning'an, what's her status? You schemed to seduce her fiancé and caused her such a public humiliation. Do you think she'll let you off? I frowned as I heard a few sentences. A maid leaned close and whispered, "Among those outside, there are people from the Ministry of Revenue, the Lin family, and one of them is Song Wan." There was some argument while picking clothes, and now they're surrounding Song Wan, not letting her leave. Just as I was about to go out, I bumped into a hurried woman. Her headscarf flew up, revealing half her face. I helped her steady herself. "Are you all right?" She paused, quickly adjusted her veil, apologized to me, and hurriedly changed direction to leave. I watched her retreating figure, deep in thought. That must be Song Wan. Her profile looked strangely familiar, and she seemed hesitant to face me. The maid muttered softly, "No wonder she ran when she saw the princess. She must be feeling guilty." I looked at the angry second Miss Lin who had followed out and asked, "What were you discussing earlier? Is there an issue with Song Wan's background?" "Who knows? They say Song Wan was raised in a temple since birth and was only recently brought back. But why was she fostered in a temple for 20 years, and suddenly this person, Song Wan, appears? Who would believe that? She looks so rough and uncouth, not like a proper lady at all. Probably just a wild girl from some poor countryside." Enough. I glanced at her coldly. Regardless of Song Wan's background before this, she is now the second young lady of the Prime Minister's family and the mistress of the Xue family. 6. After returning, I sent 2 invitations to Xue's residence, hoping to meet Song Wan. The first time, Song Wan declined, saying she was ill. The second time, Xue Mingzhuo came in her place. "I've heard about that day from Song Wan. Thank you for helping her out. Wan was too frightened and disturbed you. She wanted to apologize in person, but she's been feeling unwell lately and couldn't make it." I didn't say much and just shook my head. "It's all right." After Xue Mingzhuo left, Zhao Shiyuan came back to the residence as well. Hearing that Xue Mingzhuo had just visited, he looked displeased. "What's Xue up to? Does he have nothing better to do than come to my residence all the time? If he's so idle, I'll speak to the emperor and get him assigned to a post outside the capital." I sent the invitation. I poured him a cup of tea and asked, "Does the general remember Song Wan?" "Song Wan? Isn't she Xue Mingzhuo's wife?" "So you sent an invitation to Song Wan, and he came alone for what reason?" "Song Wan refuses to see me." Zhao Shiyuan raised an eyebrow. "Do you have some other connection with her?" I took a sip of tea and said calmly, "Not really, just that we've met a few times." I had been thinking for a while that Song Wan's avoidance wasn't just because of the mix-up. I had someone investigate her background and discovered that before being brought back by the Prime Minister's family, Song Wan was an ordinary fisherwoman from Yanxue town.
7.
After sending the invitation for the third time, Song Wan finally came. I poured a cup of tea and said without looking up, "Since you're here, why don't you come in?" A moment later, Song Wan knelt in front of me, trying to keep her voice steady, but still trembling. "I don't know why the princess wants to see me." I looked at Song Wan and smiled lightly, asking someone to help her up. "How could you not know? I noticed the jade pendant you're wearing is quite fine and seems familiar." Song Wan's face turned pale, and she hurriedly knelt again. "Please spare me, princess. It was my mistake to keep the jade pendant. It was all my fault." I took a sip of tea and said calmly, "What's the mistake? You might as well tell me everything in detail." She bit her lip, seeming to make a significant decision before speaking. 3 years ago, Yanxue town experienced a severe flood. A noble passing through stayed in the town for over a month, and on the noble's boat, there was a seriously injured young man. I am a local fisherwoman and would bring some food to the boat every few days.
8.
That night, when I encountered Xue Mingzhuo, the rain was pouring heavily, and the river wind was chilly. He was pulled from the river, dressed in black, soaked in blood. I recognized the design of his waist blade as commonly used by officials from the capital, so I kept him and had someone find a doctor to treat his wounds. The accompanying guards told me his identity was not ordinary. He was not showing his true face, but was wearing a special mask made of material. The next day, when Xue Mingzhuo woke up, I intended to ask him about his identity and background, but his memory was confused, and his eyes were too ill to see. After some fruitless conversation, I had no choice but to keep him on the boat and take care of him for over a month. During this time, Xue Mingzhuo asked me about my identity and name, and I just gave him a vague answer, coming up with the name, a Xian, to deflect. Little did I expect that this unknown person would turn out to be my fiancé. After staying in Yanshui town for a little over a month, one morning, Xue Mingzhuo suddenly left without saying a word. That afternoon, I met my cousin from my maternal grandmother's family and left with him. As for Song Wan, who was still a fisherwoman at that time, I had not paid attention to her, so I had no way of knowing when she met Xue Mingzhuo or how she obtained the jade pendant that was meant as a token. After the noble left Yanshui town, Xueling searched everywhere at the ferry for you. I approached him and talked a bit. At that time, he couldn't see and mistook me for one of your maidservants, so he gave me the jade pendant to pass on. Hearing this, I understood the general sequence of events and sighed softly. But you didn't give the jade pendant to its rightful owner, did you?
Yes.
Since you hadn't returned to Yanshui town after parting ways 3 years ago, I didn't know how to find you. Later, when the Prime Minister's family found me, I wanted to use my father's connections to inquire about you. But before I could find you, at last year's flower appreciation banquet, Xueling recognized the item at a glance and mistakenly took me for Song Wan. I'm not a fool. I looked at her calmly. Xue Mingzhuo is such a smart person. If you hadn't deliberately misled him, how could he make a mistake? Song Wan's fingers tightly twisted the handkerchief, her face growing paler by the moment. I don't know what methods you used to deceive Xue Mingzhuo, and I'm not interested in exposing you. But when you bring your deception to me, it makes me uncomfortable. Do you understand? 3 of your properties, including a pharmacy in the southern part of the city and 2 land deeds in the western part, in exchange for your stable marriage into the Xue family. How about that? Song Wan bit her lip, forcing back her tears, and bowed to me. Thank you, princess, for your understanding.
9.
A month later, the emperor, along with the officials and consorts, went to the hunting grounds for the autumn hunt. Zhao Shuyuan and his colleagues went their way, while I, along with several princesses and noble girls, noticed Song Wan in the distance, awkwardly drawing a bow. Xue Mingzhuo stood beside her like a slender bamboo, helping Song Wan control her direction, gently instructing her. Can't even draw a bow and arrow. Coming here to make a fuss. Watching this scene, I felt a strange sense of unease. Song Wan had been adopted by hunters in Yanshui town. How could she be so inexperienced with bows and arrows? Just a country girl. Why bother with her? The third princess, who was friendly with me, noticing my dislike for those 2, pulled me aside. Ningen, come with me. Don't mix with them. The scenery over here is better. A flash of white appeared in the dense forest, and the third princess smiled at me. Ningen, I want to see your skills with horse riding and archery today. I smiled in response, flicked the whip, and caught up. As we drew nearer, just as I was about to pull my bow, a sharp sound of an arrow piercing the air came from behind. I quickly sidestepped, and the arrow flew past my face, embedding itself in a tree trunk. I squinted at the arrow, noticing the mark on it, which seemed to be from the Xian family. Ningen, are you all right? The third princess rode up, frowning at the fresh blood on my face. She pulled out the arrow, her expression darkening. Xian? Get the Xian family members here. I looked at the bloodstains on the arrowhead and said calmly, if I had reacted a moment later, this arrow might have pierced my heart from behind.
10.
After questioning and searching, it was found that the Xian family's second young master was missing an arrow. Coincidentally, he had been hunting an eagle near me, but he claimed he had never seen me, and the missing arrow was on the eagle that had fallen from the cliff. After reporting this, the emperor sent people to search the cliff for the injured fallen eagle. The third princess furrowed her delicate brows. It's strange. I just heard the second daughter of Minister Liu say she saw the eagle falling from the cliff. If the hunting story is true, and the missing arrow was indeed on the eagle, then where did the arrow that nearly hit you come from? I pondered for a moment, about to speak, when I was interrupted. Xue Mingzhuo smiled at me and said, Princess, may I borrow the arrow for a moment? I've been working in the Dali Temple for many years and find this matter somewhat suspicious. He took the arrow, observed it closely, and paused slightly when his gaze fell on the mark Xian on the tail of the arrow, as if he had realized something. Did Mr. Xue discover anything? He hesitated for a moment before returning the arrow. Nothing significant. After Xue Mingzhuo left, I stared at the arrow in my hand for a while, examining it according to his earlier method. Ningen, did you notice something? I shook my head. No. It's just that didn't the princess notice that Song Wan was with Xue Mingzhuo earlier, and they shouldn't have separated midway, but they did not return together. Are you suspecting Song Wan? The third princess glanced at Song Wan in the distance. How could it be? She wouldn't be able to shoot such an arrow. It's not suspicion, just finding the detail a bit odd. Everything now is just speculation without evidence. Perhaps when the emperor finds the fallen eagle, everything will be clear. 11. After parting ways with the third princess, I returned to my tent. But after waiting for a long time, Zhao Shuyuan still hadn't arrived. By the time darkness had swallowed the last trace of twilight, I had not seen Zhao Shuyuan, but I had seen the chief steward and a team of search guards from the emperor's side instead. Moments later, they found a document in Zhao Shuyuan's belongings and detained me and my maidservants on charges of treason. Princess, the general hasn't returned yet. Could it be that he has already? Don't jump to conclusions. He will have his own countermeasures, I said quietly. Besides, hadn't father already sent trusted people to inform us before we came here? The prime minister's residence had long harbored rebellious ambitions. For years, they had infiltrated the court and controlled the administration, intending to win Zhao Shuyuan over through marriage. But Xue Mingzhuo had intervened. Since they failed to form an alliance with the general's mansion, it was just right to use this opportunity to incite suspicion, prompting the emperor to resolve both the duke's residence and Zhao Shuyuan at once. It was a good plan, killing two birds with one stone. But I lifted my gaze and looked out at the boundless darkness. Though it was pitch black, I could faintly hear the approaching sound of hoofbeats. Let's hope his hopes are dashed. At the same time, the riders reined in their horses, the clash of blades making one's heart race. Moments later, a crisp sound of braking followed, and everything fell into silence. Zhao Shuyuan stepped in, his handsome face splattered with a few drops of blood, dressed in black like a demon from hell, his features marked with unmistakable ruthlessness. As he looked over, the ferocity and grimness in his eyes seemed to miraculously disappear. He extended his hand toward me, his voice steady. Princess, I'll take you away. Before leaving, I had hidden a letter in the corner. Zhao Shuyuan leaned against the side, his sword-like eyebrows raised slightly. What's this? A letter for Xue Mingzhuo, I said, taking Zhao Shuyuan's hand and leading him out. As I told you, since Song Wan had failed to do what she promised me, why should I cover for her? Zhao Shuyuan understood my intention and couldn't help but smile, a hint of mockery in his expression. I wonder what Xue Mingzhuo will think when he sees this letter. I was curious too. How would Xue Mingzhuo feel knowing he had missed the person he was actually looking for due to a misunderstanding? Would he still side with Song Wan and the prime minister's residence after the incident?
12.
Zhao Shuyuan escorted me southward at night to meet my father, encountering several groups of the prime minister's people on the way. He did not take action himself, but let his trusted aides handle them. Tonight, the moon hung high, and the wilderness was vast and empty. After traveling for a while, we suddenly heard the sound of galloping hooves piercing through the stillness of the deep mountain forest, unusually clear. Zhao Shuyuan instantly became alert, guiding me to hide in the forest. As the sounds grew closer, Zhao Shuyuan tensed, protecting me behind him, his golden blade ready. Under the moonlight, the approaching figure slowed, dismounting and walking slowly from the thick darkness. The moonlight outlined a slender figure, and a clear yet slightly hoarse voice came through. Princess, Xue dares to request a meeting. Zhao Shuyuan snorted lightly. You're quite quick. Please, General Zhao, step aside for a moment. I have some words to speak with the princess privately. Moments later, I walked out of the forest. Xue Mingzhuo had come alone, carrying nothing but a tightly clenched letter in his hand, looking pale and haggard. Upon seeing me, Xue Mingzhuo's eyes lit up momentarily, but quickly dimmed again. He appeared dazed and murmured, "A Xian, is it really you?" I nodded slightly, my tone calm. "Mr. Xue, when we parted in Yanshui town 3 years ago, I didn't expect today's situation." The air suddenly grew quiet. Xue Mingzhuo's eyelids twitched violently. After a long while, he raised his eyes, his expression confused. "A Xian, are you blaming me?" Before I could answer, he lowered his eyes, self-deprecatingly smiling. He sighed deeply. "You have every right to blame me. It is my fault that you couldn't even recognize me. If you blame me, it's only natural." "No, I don't blame you." I maintained a gentle demeanor. "In fact, Zhao Shiyuan is much more reliable than you. We had no fate with each other before, but if it weren't for Mr. Xue's actions, I wouldn't have such a good husband. So not only do I not blame you, but I also want to thank Mr. Xue for not marrying me." Xue Mingzhuo's face turned pale, his eyelashes trembling, and his gaze slowly fell on the people behind me. He closed and reopened his eyes, managing a somewhat acceptable smile. "That's good. But I have one more question. When you asked for the arrow engraved with Xian, did you already realize that it wasn't Xian but a modified Xue? From that moment, you must have started to suspect Song Wan, right? Otherwise, why would you have reacted so quickly tonight? I thought you would wait until I met with my father before coming to me." Xue Mingzhuo lowered his eyes, the long lashes casting a small shadow. "Hiku Xiaodao. Princess, you have sharp eyes." I sighed, not wanting to stay any longer. "Mr. Xue, be cautious in your decisions regarding the future." "Xue is aware." "Thank you, Princess." Just as we were about to leave, an arrow whizzed through the air. Zhao Shiyuan, who had been carefully watching the situation, moved with incredible speed, leaping forward and cutting the arrow in half with a single stroke. "Princess Ning'an, General Zhao, did you just think of leaving? Is it really that easy?" Torches suddenly lit up in the forest, their fiery light revealing the approaching figure's face. Unlike her usual gentle and graceful demeanor, there was a cold, blade-like aura about her. It was Song Wan. 13. Zhao Shiyuan reacted swiftly, grabbing me with one hand and holding a sword to Xue Mingzhuo's neck as he retreated into the forest behind us. "Song Wan, if you want Xue Mingzhuo to return to you unharmed, clear the way." Song Wan's voice was cold. "Zhao Shiyuan, I might let you go, but Xue Mingzhuo and Chen Ning'an must stay." "Xue Mingzhuo is in my hands. Do you think you have the right to bargain with me?" As Zhao Shiyuan spoke, the sword pressed closer, drawing a faint line of blood. "Stop." Song Wan, in the end, did not dare to gamble with Xue Mingzhuo's life. She gritted her teeth and ordered her people to step back, creating a path. Xue Mingzhuo's life was indeed valuable. We traveled over 50 miles with him in our custody, and no one dared to make a move along the way. Before entering the city, I asked Xue Mingzhuo, "Do you want to come with us into the city?" Xue Mingzhuo hesitated, a clear sign of uncertainty on his face. Before he could answer, Song Wan, who had been following us, could no longer contain herself. Suppressing her anger, she said, "Chen Ning'an, if my husband hadn't been taken hostage, do you think I would have let you go tonight? Do you really think I wouldn't attack the city? Whether you stay or leave, it should depend on Mr. Xue's wishes." I smiled faintly. "The Song family has disturbed the emperor's ear and caused chaos in the court. You, as a subject of the emperor, are helping the villains. Rather than going back with you, it would be better to stay and discuss how to eradicate the rebels with us." The princess is indeed sharp-tongued, confounding right and wrong with impressive skill, Song Wan said coldly, her eyes filled with resentment, as if she wanted to stab me with her gaze. "Husband, I am pregnant. This child is not even a month old yet. Are you really going to leave me at this time?" Xue Mingzhuo looked up suddenly, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white, and he asked in disbelief, "Is what you said true?" "Only you can calculate the dates to know if I am lying," I said calmly. Tears were barely visible in Song Wan's eyes. "You may resent and hate me, but this child, he is your flesh and blood. Are you truly so heartless that you would abandon both me and the child? This child is quite timely, I said, narrowing my eyes. Madam has had a lot of disturbances recently. It would be better to go into the city and ask a few doctors to check if the pregnancy is stable. The doctor arrived quickly and confirmed that Song Wan was indeed pregnant, and as she said, it was less than a month along. Xue Mingzhuo sighed deeply and bowed to me. Since she is pregnant, I cannot disregard this child. Moreover, most of my Xue family members are still in the capital. With that, I couldn't insist on keeping him and let Xue Mingzhuo go into the city. Before leaving, Song Wan gave me a glance. Princess, we shall meet again another day. No need for that. Madam should stay at home and take care of the pregnancy, I said. Song Wan smiled lightly and said nothing more. 14. After a few days of rest, my father and Zhao Shiyuan gathered an army of 50,000 and marched north to the capital to deal with the treacherous officials. The two sides were almost evenly matched, but with Zhao Shiyuan's presence, my father quickly broke through 3 cities. It was at this time that I received a letter from Song Wan. She had captured the 3rd princess and was using her as leverage to force me into the capital. Zhao Shiyuan disagreed with my risking myself. Song Wan has harbored resentment against you for a long time. If you go, she might use any means against you. It's too dangerous. But the 3rd princess cannot hold out much longer, I said, looking at the shortening candle, its flickering light reflecting in my eyes. If I don't go, what will happen to her? Song Wan wouldn't dare to harm the 3rd princess, Zhao Shiyuan said firmly. She would only suffer some physical pain. Similarly, she wouldn't dare to really harm me, I said with a calm smile. I've been with my father, practicing swordplay and military tactics since I was young, only returning to the capital at 15. But you are different. Zhao Shiyuan gazed at me steadily and finally compromised. All right, but you must wait until I arrive. 3 days later, I went to the capital as agreed and met with Song Wan. 15. 3 months later, she had obviously shown more in her pregnancy, with a slightly protruding abdomen. It was snowing at the time, and she was wrapped in a thick fox fur coat, her black hair falling by her face, making her complexion even paler, with faint dark circles under her eyes. She looked much more refined, but also much more haggard. On the way, I had heard many rumors. Song Wan and Xue Mingzhuo were once a loving couple envied by others, but since our last parting, Xue Mingzhuo had moved into his own private residence. Song Wan visited him every day, but he had refused to see her. Princess, you haven't changed since we last met. It seems you've been living quite comfortably lately, which is truly enviable. Song Wan stared at me, her eyes flashing with resentment. Princess, you're so devoted, risking yourself for the 3rd princess. But I gave you such a good husband. Why did you have to disrupt my good fortune? Madam jokes. Fate cannot be forced. How could I intervene? Song Wan released her grip on my chin, snorting. Stop pretending with me. Although Xue Mingzhuo doesn't say it, his heart has always been on you. A Xian. Now that I've brought him the Xian he's truly looking for, do you think he'll react? Song Wan had her people bind my hands and feet, then opened the door and walked in, her voice turning soft and sweet. Husband, I've brought an old friend of yours to visit. Aren't you coming out to meet her? After a moment of silence, the sound of dragging chains was heard, and a door was pushed open from the inside. Xue Mingzhuo, wrapped in a large cloak, looked as pale as snow. Amidst the disheveled clothes, a black chain was visible on his ankle. His undone de Mugong swept over Song Wan and finally rested on me. His expression remained unchanged, but there was a clear sense of absurdity in his eyes. Xue Mingzhuo slowly shifted his gaze away from me and forced a smile. Song Wan, you're truly mad. 16. From a rural fisherwoman to the daughter of a powerful official, Song Wan was indeed exceptionally clever and cunning. But compared to her madness and obsession, these traits were nothing. I had seen people who were smarter, more resilient, patient, and unscrupulous than her, but no one had ever been as recklessly insane as she was. She had poisoned the emperor, several princes, the prime minister's family, the Xue family, and Xue Mingzhuo. For the first time, I felt that I had underestimated someone. Looking at the bowl of black medicine presented to me, I was momentarily at a loss for words. Song Wan, what exactly do you want? Song Wan looked at me with an icy expression. All I want is to be with Xue forever, but none of you have allowed me to do so. What can I do? I can only make you all silent and ensure that Xue stays by my side willingly forever. And you, Chen Ningen, Song Wan raised her voice, sharply accusing, I was the one who met Xue first. Why did you have to intervene? If it weren't for you, Xue and I would have been together a long time ago. If it weren't for you, my husband and I would have lived happily, and we wouldn't be in this situation now. Song Wan's insistence on Xue was ironic, as she had locked him with chains at the head of the bed. After a bowl of poison went down, I chose to remain silent. I watched as Song Wan walked to Xue Mingzhuo, her face brightening with a gentle smile. She leaned into his embrace like a delicate flower and said softly, Husband, you haven't paid attention to me for days. Will you have dinner with me later? Xue Mingzhuo awkwardly moved away, pulling his arm from Song Wan's grasp. I'm not hungry. The smile on Song Wan's face vanished instantly, and her expression turned dark. She looked at me with an ambiguous smile. Since my husband is not hungry, I suppose the princess isn't hungry either. I'll have my meal alone then. She said this, and was about to leave when Xue Mingzhuo called out to her. Wan Yang, must you pressure me so? How could you say that, husband? Song Wan laughed softly, covering her mouth. I only imitate how you treat me, how you treat the princess. Xue Mingzhuo looked troubled, and after a long while, he finally stood up. Then please, Wan Yang, unlock my chains. I will dine with you. 17. Song Wan stayed almost constantly by Xue Mingzhuo's side, while I was locked in a room under constant guard. One day, when Xue Mingzhuo displeased Song Wan, she did not send food to me. As I sat alone in the room, Xue Mingzhuo brought me a package of pastries. Princess, please wait a few more days. We'll be able to leave soon. He looked even more emaciated than before, his entire demeanor sickly and lifeless, a heartbreaking sight. Thank you, Mr. Xue, but you should leave quickly. Xue Mingzhuo nodded and turned to leave, only to come face to face with Song Wan, who was watching expressionlessly from a short distance. Wan Yang, my husband is tired. Someone, help him back to his room. Without saying another word, Song Wan walked straight into my room. Her expression was calm, but the anger lurking in her eyes burned ever hotter, like magma solidifying into marble, shattering and then flowing again in the fire. After a moment of silence, a soft laugh broke the quiet. Chen Ningen, I really want to kill you. I gave a faint smile and remained silent. Song Wan composed herself and looked at me again. Princess, you are a respected noble, well known for your embroidery skills. Our child will be born in a few months. How about you embroider a few garments for him? Madam jokes. My embroidery skills are quite ordinary. I am asking you to embroider, so you will. I'll have someone bring you the patterns and tools later. Don't sleep tonight. Finish the embroidery before you sleep. I sighed. I have no affection left for Xue Mingzhuo. Why do this? With a sharp crash, Song Wan smashed a teacup, glaring at me. But he still cares about you. I am pregnant, yet he doesn't care if I'm tired or whether I can eat, and instead, he specially came to bring you food. Song Wan threw another tantrum, repeatedly instructing her servants to ensure I finished the embroidery before leaving. I stayed up most of the night and finally managed to embroider a passable little garment. Lying on the bed, I took out the pastries Xue Mingzhuo had given me and broke one open to find a note and a few wax pellets inside. It was the antidote. 18. After a few days of embroidery work, Song Wan seemed to lose interest and had me bound and taken away. She had a hole made in the lake and smiled sweetly at Xue Mingzhuo. Husband, if I and she both fall in, who will you save? Xue Mingzhuo pressed his bloodless lips together, trembling as he spoke. Wan Yang, calm down. Don't do this. Not receiving the answer she wanted, Song Wan turned to me and said softly, "Princess, do you want to know the answer? Why don't we test it? I'll push you in first, and you can see for yourself how cold and freezing the lake is." With every word, Xue Mingzhuo's expression grew more disappointed. "I advise madam to think carefully. The lake water in this harsh winter will cost you half your life. And you're pregnant, so don't be so reckless." "Yes, the princess is considerate," Song Wan said with a smile blooming on her lips. "Then I won't go in. Princess, please experience it for me." Before she finished speaking, a hand suddenly pushed me forward from behind. I sidestepped and grabbed the wrist of the person who pushed me, using their force to pull them forward. With a splash, the maid who had pushed me fell into the water. Song Wan's expression changed slightly. "When did you loosen the ropes?" But she then remembered that she had poisoned me and regained her composure, directing her guards to capture me. However, the house was soon surrounded. Until I was taken away, Song Wan could hardly believe it, her face darkening. How could it be breached so quickly? What are those useless officials doing? What about the palace guards? After I sent out the antidote given by Xue Mingzhuo, and with the poison threat removed, the palace naturally would not heed her orders anymore. As for the prime minister's house, it was already falling apart internally, easily shattered. Zhao Shuyuan had taken the city with little effort. Xue Mingzhuo came to see me. "Princess, I have a request. Song Wan is still pregnant. Although she has committed grave crimes, the child is innocent. Could you spare her life?" During the days Song Wan had imprisoned me, Xue Mingzhuo had been restricted and his condition worsened daily, no longer the vibrant figure he once was. Yet at this point, he was still pleading for Song Wan. I shook my head. Rebellion is a crime punishable by the eradication of 9 generations. The emperor is merciful to the Xue family, but there is no chance of sparing Song Wan. Furthermore, Song Wan was never pregnant. She had a doctor from the city examine her, and it turned out she had used some sort of fake pregnancy drug from the underworld to create the appearance of pregnancy and the symptoms. Upon hearing this, Xue Mingzhuo leaned weakly against a stone pillar, closing his eyes. So, it was like that. 19. After my father entered the capital and, along with Zhao Shuyuan, cleared out the faction of the prime minister's family, he appointed many of his own people. At this time, news came that Song Wan had disappeared. Also missing was the newly appointed Xue Mingzhuo. At the time, Zhao Shuyuan was helping me choose new clothes for the new year. Upon hearing this news, he calmly took a sip of tea. Song Wan is quite deep and knows many people in the underworld. She must have realized that poisoning was not a long-term solution and had already planned an escape before being captured. I'm afraid her imprisonment was also premeditated. Only, I did not expect her obsession with Xue Mingzhuo to be so deep. I sighed. Should we seal the city immediately? If she manages to escape the capital, it will be difficult to catch her. Let it be. Zhao Shuyuan shook his head, his gaze drifting to the snow-covered street outside the window. The street was blanketed in snow, with people coming and going, carrying red paper packets or salted meat, and some homes had already hung red lanterns. He smiled gently, his eyes curving. "Let them have a good new year."